Hi, everyone. I think you all know me, but if you don't, I'm Eric Wellman, First Selectman. Dave Bush is, as you know, is Chair of Culture, Parks, and Rec, and is the joint meeting. I just want to confirm from staff, we received no public audience for today.
Correct. No
Okay.
Public audience for today.
All right, then without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Dan Biggs with Weston and Sampson for presentation, and then really look forward to the Q&A and discussion. Hi, Dan.
Yeah, Dan, if I could just butt in, if you could, I see the monitor is a little bit low. If you could just speak a little bit slowly and make sure you articulate, that would really help people to hear your presentation.
Thanks for the reminder, Susan. I already dropped the ball on that.
Oh,
Thank you.
I got my back covered. Thank you.
Good.
So Tom and I talked earlier today. Tom, you're going to share the screen with the PDF?
Yes. Yep.
So the thought for today was we received some comments, kind of a collection of comments that Tom's going to share here in a minute or so. But the hope was to receive any other comments. We really haven't received a ton of comments this last go around. We've now in round 2 or 3 at this point. But the hope is to take these last comments, roll them into the final document or final draft, and then put together a presentation to the select board to share what the process was and what the ultimate recommendations of the project were. And that would really complete our process to date.
I'm trying to get that PDF up.
Was that PDF circulated to members of the committee?
Yes, everybody has had it at a minimum, close 2 weeks today at a minimum. I received feedback from Marjorie, Dave Bush, Kelly Kearney, Jerry Wetchen, Danielle Shelley, Sarah Kramer, and then myself and Orlando Casiano, the park superintendent. I'm trying to get this open. I have not received written feedback from anybody else, so I'm assuming that today they will do it orally, and we'll do our best to keep up. But if you had prepared comments today, and if you can forward those to me after the meeting, that would certainly be helpful, because then I can make sure we get exactly what the point you were trying to get across, and I can get it to Dan. And I've been trying to compile everything into one document to give him, so that would certainly make things a little easier for both of us. It should be. Can everybody see the PDF yet?
Yes.
Yes.
It's you actually see the picture of the circle garden at.
It looks like it's the meeting notice or the agenda for today.
Okay, I'm trying to share from my desktop. Let's see, so share. There we go. So with that being said, we could do this one of two ways. We could go around the table with the thoughts and comments and have discussion. For instance, if Susan had something she wanted to discuss, we can kind of go through Susan's comments and have discussion on those points, or I can open up the document that I had previously given Dan earlier in the week with the compiled comments and go through those. But is there a preference from Eric or Dave how you'd like to do it?
No.
Go a little bit more slowly, Tom, please.
Sure. I apologize, Helen. So, is there anything somebody would like to bring up first? We could start. I'm looking at Susan on the screen. Susan, would you like to start first?
Are you asking us to give you some general feedback right now, and then we
Yes.
can be more specific as we go forward?
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Just a couple of thoughts, if I may share with you. As I read the document, it was clear to me that the consultants had a pretty good grasp of how, this is a citizen-driven document, and they did a very good job of indicating that in their commentary. I think they understood, especially from the viewpoint of the open space holdings and the open space issues in town. I thought they did a very good job. It was a learning document for me, things like finding out that the townspeople of Simsbury spend $13.5 million a year just for user fees. That's quite an income generating thing. I was taken away by that because I'm not up to these things. I'm also wanting to come from the perspective that this document was commissioned by the Commission, by the Parks and Rec and the Parks and Rec Department. I'm not being negative, but we were lumped in as the open space issue. And so therefore my comments may come more specifically from that viewpoint. Number one, there was reference to index, but the index was not there. That's a generalization. Be more specific. The consultants acknowledged so much in this document as to their research into some history, present day commentary from the citizens, the philosophy. I think they grasped all of that fairly well. What comes to mind is that this particular plan addresses so much about the facilities that the town owns for active recreation. That's where your commentary, the commentary went, the recommendations. I'm trying to shoe in here with a few thoughts. Go to my notes. Let me be specific about one reference that was on page 4. You listed several documents that you studied and so forth, and among those documents were the management plans that the town had ordered back in 2014, 2015. I would like to state that those documents I consider, and we should consider, outdated. Furthermore, they were not acted upon for several reasons, but basically because after thorough vetting and lots of debate, good reason was found that it did not reflect the emerging science of the day. And I'm just worried that this particular group of documents, and as you expressed in the document, you said these documents were viewed by the consultant team and have been integrated into the analysis and recommendations of the Parks and Open Space Master Plan. I just wonder how valid that can or should be. Moving along, as I read through the document, one more thing. It was stated how important the POCD was and what an important role that it played in the analysis. The importance of how we should partner and join alliances with other groups such as land trust and so forth. How important it is for towns to form alliances because open space does not have a border. It knows no border. So we need to be, let's say, concerned about that and always thinking about how we should partner not only with, let's say, neighboring towns and their holdings, but land trusts, state holdings. It sort of encompasses everything. Then I noticed how it was mentioned how important the advisory issue of the Parks and Rec Commission is to the Parks and Rec Department, as well as to the Board of Selectmen. But if I missed it, please point it out to me. But I found no reference to the Open Space Committee and its importance historically, not just for acquisition, but how it has received the mandate from the Board of Selectmen to be advisory on all holdings of open space to their stewardship. So I think somewhere in this plan, I think somewhere we need to recognize that the Open Space Committee must be advisory to the town department, just as the Parks and Rec Commission is to the Parks and Rec Department. The Parks and Rec Department has been given the mandate to take care of all of these holdings. I think the plan addresses fairly well. It's not my purview specifically, but I think I understood that it addressed very well how the facilities must be maintained. And I'm thinking about how the open space land, we have so much facility in town. We address the need of the citizens to play, to recreate, to be active. But unless we address knowingly how important left alone conserved land is to our very health, we can't breathe well enough to bike, play pickleball, or do any of those active things. So I would like to say, going forward in our discussion, that we find some way to put into this document a little bit more advisory language that allows us to be upfront and at the table from the beginning when any maintenance activity. I mean, if you've got town staff that you're, going to be doing certain jobs to take care of the open land, I need to hear something more specific, like when you make recommendations for certain specific personnel that needs to be added to the town to take care of the facilities. They come to the town with their expertise, with their education, with their training, whatever they bring to take care of these things for us. I'd like to see and hear a little bit more importance placed in how this personnel should also be well versed in monitoring open space, doing specific chores like invasives. Too much is being left in that realm for volunteers. Yes, volunteers may have to do the gut of the work, but I think personnel must reflect how the town feels about the conservation issue of our lands. And the personnel must be ready to help the townspeople. You're going to have change in staffing all the time, but there should be someone there to help us coordinate, form alliances. And for instance, one little more specific, if you're going to have personnel to help the director of the Parks and Rec Department to formulate programs, how to play pickleball, how to do this or that. How about informational forums, not to be left for forums only, which I think they're necessary from the public and from volunteer groups. But I think personnel needs to be up front and on top of formulating educational opportunities to educate the people of Simsbury how to behave in their conserved lands, why the conserved land is there, how to monitor it, how to be part of that part of our life so that we can go out and bike and play pickleball. Thank you for listening. I may have something else to bring up later, but I just wanted to give you my overview of how I felt about this document as I read through it.
Thank you, Helen. Is there somebody who'd like to go next or follow up on Helen's comments?
Sure. This is Susan. I have a tiny short list of things that might be a little bit more specific. I do think I've been looking into this a lot, and I do think there is a lot that we can do with volunteers and citizens. I can talk about that a little bit more later, as long as they have some good guidelines. And people are I'm finding that people are really interested in this. One of the specific comments that I had, and I want to apologize, I've been flat out with things at the college. So I just read this yesterday, skimmed through it. But on page 70, I think the Ethel Walker Woods is not on the map. And I apologize if any of these things are inaccurate. I really just tried to go through quickly and see what I could pick out. So that was one concern that I had. There's a comment in there about returning open space kind of pathways and things to the neighborhoods or to adjacent neighbors. I don't think anyone suggested that during this process. And I would personally just like to refer back to the comments that I made at previous meetings about the value of these little spaces, and comments that other people have sent in to the Board of Selectmen. Just in terms of the neighborhood that I live in, Mountain Farms, it may say that these paths only benefit neighbors, but these paths connect to the rail trail. The neighborhood is like 200 houses or something. So it's not like just one or two people that are benefiting. It's all the neighbors. It's the kids that use it. It's the kids getting across the street to the park. It's really kind of, it's a case by case basis. So I don't like that as a blanket recommendation. So that's a concern that I have. I don't think anyone brought that up, and I'm not sure what the real benefit is. And we've talked already about how to reduce the maintenance cost for the town for those spaces, which is really the main issue that we wanted to address. Like, is it excessive cost to the town, considering the public benefit for those little walking paths and things like that? So that's one comment. Wanted to bring up again the pump track, which is now in Town Forest Park. A pump track is a very specific thing. I don't see where anyone is asking for a pump track. I'm just really hesitant to start adding more things to the town's maintenance roster when that's something we're trying to reduce. No one is asking for this. People love to just be outside in Simsbury and get some peace of mind. And I think we need to focus on that as like priority number one, and concentrate our recreational activities in areas where we have infrastructure, parking, bathrooms, and businesses that people can spend their money at. So that's where we should put more intensive recreation-oriented infrastructure. One thing that I'm concerned about is I did send a whole bunch of documents because I wanted this plan to be kind of a central hub where we refer to other important information, like our open space inventory, like our policies, like our inventories that we have. And I sent a whole list of that stuff, manuals that you can use for the monitoring that Helen is talking about. And I don't see that in the plan. So I'm just wondering, is that just an omission or something that can be tagged on? I'm not even asking you to integrate it, but I just want these things to be in one place so that when people refer back to it, they'll say, oh, okay, we have a policy for agricultural leases, and this is the rationale. We have a policy for open space disposition or acquisition. We have an inventory for this property, and that's what we need to pay attention to. We have deeds that we should look at before we do anything on a property. And this has been the consistent message that I have been giving for years now. And if that is not in this plan, I don't want my name on it. I'm really going to lose my mind. That's my
Susan. I don't think the appendices got uploaded to the town's website.
Okay.
But the email that you guys, the board received a few weeks ago with the review, it did have a link to the appendices. The open space inventory and a few of those other documents were there. I think
I will check that. Yeah. I will check that. I apologize. I just looked at the link and I didn't see that stuff on there, and I was just like,
yep. I apologize that it wasn't added to the link. There's two separate documents that came, or two separate links that came from Weston and Sampson. So that original link that the board members were sent a few weeks ago to review, it did have those documents on there. I have even the hard copy you may have received the other day should have had it, I believe.
Okay, I didn't even get a chance to go to town hall. I just checked the link. So I tracked my lost mind. And then in that case, I have one more tiny comment where it talks about carbon programs, I think on page 102. And there are good carbon programs and not so good carbon programs. And I think that's something we should, consider carefully. And there are a couple of properties in town that we could put in a carbon program, like the corridor that connects to the Eastern Wildway, that would basically bring the town money for 20 years, for doing nothing. So I think that is a valid conversation to have, and I'm glad that was in the report. I mean, that's a future, more detailed conversation. So anyway, thank you. Now I'm feeling better. We can continue with the meeting.
As far as the HOA goes, it's something we have continuously talked about. I don't think it's been completely cleaned up in the draft plan. And so Marjorie actually did a really good notation of it in her feedback to me, and I'm looking for the exact wording that she put in the comments here. And I had forwarded those to Weston and Sampson the other day. Marjorie, if you're on the call, can you read? Can you?
Yes. And Tom, I wonder if you could get the take your shared screen off so that we can see each other.
Oh, sure. I could do that.
Yeah. I just don't think we have any, I don't think all of those neighbors have homeowners associations, and I don't think we really have any structure for that or any way for the town to have ultimate oversight of it. So I don't know that, and I'm not sure it's all wanted in all of those areas. So I'd feel very reluctant about turning over those areas to the maintenance of a homeowners association, which I don't think exists.
I'm not catching what you're saying, Marjorie. Go slowly and carefully, please.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that we have any homeowners associations. And I don't think the town can turn over the responsibility of those lands to those.
There are homeowners who have assumed that.
Yes, but I don't think there's a structure.
And they've done it on their own, yes. But
yes, I don't think there's
it should not be encouraged in that way.
Yeah. But I also agree with you, Helen, that the document is very good for recreation of our open space, but that's not the only purpose of our open space.
No.
And I'm not quite sure that there was enough emphasis on the fact that most of the citizens in the responses talked about the use of open space for passive recreation.
But how about just the issue of, may I just interject? I'm sorry, I jumped right in again. Not recreation, not even passive, the value that the forests and the open land, the meadows, whatever, have just to be there for other reasons,
there are other
our recreation.
That's right. There are other residents of the town. Granted, they don't pay taxes, but they are the other creatures that live here, shall we say, who also use the open space. They live there. I know they're not funding this document, but they should be represented somehow. The open space is there for more than just us.
Can I make a comment, please?
Yeah.
It relates to Susan and folks, bear with me. First of all, I'm Kelly Kearney on Parks and Rec. Susan, thanks for that passion, because I tend to have that same type of style with the Parks and Rec. So folks that are on Parks and Rec know that I'll often dive deeply into a topic and exude that passion for various topics. So I commend you on that. Relative to the walking paths and the maintenance, Maria will certainly be able to know that I have taken an active interest in that and oftentimes shared my quote unquote passionate views on that. I feel like for the town, it's important for us to consider that topic as part of this, because it's, number one, it helps to integrate, and which was clearly one of the biggest recommendations. And number two, and this will dovetail into the other comments, well-maintained paths, cut grass, attractive walking leads to greater use. And so whether it's the Owens Brook pathway or the various pathways throughout the town, I think we need to make that a priority, lest they become overgrown and then underutilized. And clearly that's something that we need to make sure it takes the attention of this plan, as well as when we're allocating resources, that gets taken care of correctly. And I think it was Helen, I'm not sure, but someone mentioned the lack of structure. And I think when we leave here and we have this final document that's adopted, it needs to have structure so that long after we're gone and we're moved on, others can follow. And I think, Susan, you also mentioned this, others can follow the plan itself and relate to the structure that was set up and say that, yep, this is going to be handled in such and such a way. So I feel like allowing homeowners to adopt, even though it's a nice idea, it allows for a lack of continuity through the years. And I don't know, Tom, do you want me to put my other comments in here now, or do you want me to hold off?
Go ahead, Kelly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Who was that speaking, please?
It's Kelly Kearney. I'm Vice Chair of Parks and Rec.
Oh, Dave. Oh, no, I'm
No,
sorry.
it's me.
Got it. Okay,
Hey,
thank
Helen.
you.
We'll meet one of these days, Helen. Real
I
quick,
didn't see your face, so I didn't know who it was. I'm sorry.
the only other main comment, not to tie this meeting up too long, for the folks from Weston and Sampson, is to say thank you. Nice job. One of the things that concerns me the most, though, is that we have a document that doesn't get turned into a living, breathing plan. Having been on Parks and Rec for so many years, I had seen a previous plan. It might have been for the golf course, I'm not sure. But unfortunately, that turned into a bookmark, a paperweight on shelves. And I think one of the things we need to walk away with is specific actionable items that not only are adopted formally, but are turned into an action plan. So folks that have responsibilities, folks that have these things built into their measurements in their positions, because otherwise we all know if we don't have this thing turned into a living document, it's nice to read, it's nice to talk about, and then we move on to the other things that are priorities. So again, thank you for all the great work. Hopefully we can turn that into actionable, prioritized items.
I just want to, Kelly, let me just tag on to that. I absolutely want this to be a living document that's kind of a hub for this information. So if we get additional information on any of our properties or whatever, we can just continue to kind of add to the appendices and add to our repository of information. So I 100% would like to second that. I mean, that's our responsibility, not the consultants, but I agree with you.
Susan, following the last round of comments, or one other iteration of comments, when I think that it was brought up of all these significant documents that have been acquired, and we gathered a lot, so we have a pretty big library right now from both sides, open space and Parks and Rec. And I talked with Tom as to what's the best way. I think even Maria was in that conversation, that really allocating a website or a page on the town's website that would be dedicated of equal importance to what Parks Rec may have right now, to have that library uploaded and allowed to be accessible for residents and other interest users. So although it may not be in the appendices, like I think you're noting, because it's our directory right now is pretty long and deep, but we acknowledge the need to have these documents brought forward for others to access them, because it was a challenge for us just to find them. So if I'm having a problem and I'm asking specific questions about what I need, a citizen that just wants to know if the lawn gets mowed out back because it's an open space, they can't find it, it's going to be hard for them too. So I think we acknowledge that in the last set of revisions, to have a formal place to locate all these documents was the process. So I don't think you're going to see them in the appendices of all those files, but that they would need to go into a local website or page to be accessible.
And Maria and I have talked about this at length as well. I think we're planning to use the town's open space page on that website as a location for this repository, for Susan and anyone else who's interested. So that, I think going forward, we would be working on getting everything that everybody thinks should be there, and adding it to that site so it's accessible by everybody.
Thanks, Tom. This is Eric. I wanted to see if I could jump in with a question, a comment, and then just a broader observation. My first is a question for Dan, and it's around the recommendations around parking, especially some of the parking challenges that that came to light out of the survey. And I was just wondering about your work more broadly. Is parking something that people just universally complain about, or is there some unique opportunity that Simsbury has?
You're not very unique. We kind of relate it to the mall, a shopping mall, where, you know, if you go around the mall, there's thousands of parking stalls that are used on that day before Christmas or the Thanksgiving period of heavy shopping. You know, that's what a mall is designed for, to hold that excessive capacity. But on most scenarios, you're down 25, maybe 30% on an average day of use of a parking stall. We always get complaints of not enough parking, period. And so we are constantly balancing the desire for more parking versus the recommendation to have better walking, biking access to a park facility or between facilities to quasi discourage one-stop parking and to encourage other uses to be active to get to use the park. So take, for example, my daughters are 7 and 9. I'll probably jump in here in a couple of minutes, unfortunately. They would like to ride their bikes, learn how to ride a bike in a park. I, as a parent, will drive, if I have to a local parking lot and ride my bikes on sidewalks to get to a park if there's no parking there. Other parents may not necessarily do that. They want to drive and go to the trailhead, unload their bikes, and then ride in the park as necessary if there isn't access from our home. So it is a constant struggle on every park plan that we do. And it's that fine balance between, we just have that little surge to accommodate within a park space, a park in the grass for a couple hours to handle overload. But we don't need to have dedicated more parking lots to handle that 1, 2, 3, maybe a couple times a year surge of parking demand.
Yeah, thank you. I think about all of the things in this plan that are going to cost money and need to be prioritized. And I would think about, if we're going to spend money on parking, to really focus on the ADA and accessibility issues rather than perhaps needing more.
And sometimes it's just getting people familiar with what are the other alternatives to getting to a park or open space that people, I don't want to say they need to be handed that map or handed that ease of access, but if it's hard to find, people will take the easy route and want to have instant access. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Okay. Thanks. One observation that I wanted to share, or a comment, just how much I appreciate sprinkled throughout this entire document is the mention of pollinators, native plants and grasses that are going to require less maintenance and be less costly in the long run, protecting habitats for birds and bugs, and pollinators has arisen as one of the priorities for the Board of Selectmen. So I really appreciate seeing that in here. Marjorie, I don't know if that's completely your doing or if there are others whose fingerprints have touched that, but I think it's important, and I wanted to.
I think we brought it up, Susan and I brought it up when we were on the trails with Rochelle. But yeah, thank you very much for putting them in, and especially the native. If we're going to plant things, just plant native.
Yeah. And the last thing isn't really about this document, but it's really about what we do with it. And my breath was taken away when I saw the table comparing what Simsbury spends per capita on our parks and open space compared to towns we like to compare ourselves to. Frankly, it's embarrassing. And it goes against the story that I think we like to tell ourselves about how we're taxed and how our money is spent. And I think it's really in part a testament, Tom, to you and your team and how much you do with the limited resources you have. But I think that this, I'm going to need the help from this group with the Board of Selectmen in subsequent conversations to figure out how do we fund these things that ultimately turn out to be priorities.
I appreciate that, Eric. I mean, especially when we're starting to talk about those neighborhood walking paths, for instance, the ones by in the Firetown neighborhood, those paths are literally falling apart. And if we're going to restore those paths, we need that funding to do so. And I think to Kelly's point, they would get more use. And I actually spoke with a resident the other day from the Bike Advisory Council. You know, with our whole situation we're living in right now with COVID-19 and how our kids going to get to school this year with busing, these trails become even more important as school access paths. And so looking forward, I think it is important for us to address these paths and hopefully in future requests we can make the point that we need these paths to be in good condition as well.
Thanks.
So I'd like to then follow up on both Kelly and Eric's comments, and now yours as well, Tom. I think what the one comment, first of all, great document. You guys have done a lot of work. It's very apparent. One thing I would just want to mention is under Belden Forest, Ethel Walker Woods, and Onion Mountain, there are recommendations regarding either determining which trails are redundant or should be abandoned or moved. And I would simply appreciate specific examples or information based on your expertise, simply because as funding comes in that we have to then do the work, we would be able to look back on this document to say this was a specific recommendation, therefore it needs funding. And likewise, though, Susan, I'm going to agree with you that, and sorry, this is the lawyer in me. I'm not aware anybody asked for a pump track to be in here. The town has enough to maintain as it is. And from a liability standpoint, I think that is a large mistake. And unless I missed something in the town input, I would really ask that be removed, or my position would be that should not be part of the document.
Dave, excuse me, that pump track recommendation came through the focus group. The focus group meetings and the public and the survey that went out to the town. That's where the mountain biking and the pump track. Now, specific locations were not discussed, and we've talked about removing those specific locations and for the town to determine if we were to move forward with those type of initiatives, what the town would determine what the best location is for those. But just so you know, those concepts came through, just like the splash pad and that kind of thing, all came through the focus groups and the survey and the initial public meeting I believe we had at Westminster. Okay,
and I appreciate that. Just unfortunately, then that means something that you and I will work on more is probably liability waivers and things like that. The last comment I have again is really just geared towards specifics so that we have a basis for requesting funding. Under Part 10, Section 1.4.1, you talk about maintenance standards or best maintenance practices. I would think your organization at Weston has access to what are those, and Tom, you may already have them. The more specific we could be about what those are so that we could then use that to request funding, that would be something that I would appreciate. But other than that, I thought you did, especially from a recreation standpoint, I think it's a very thorough document, and as Kelly said, I hope it becomes really our outline for an action plan in the future. Thanks.
Dan, will you be able to talk about any specific, is it possible to get specific recommendations as far as best management practices from your perspective, experience?
Yeah, it's challenging because there are, quote, standards for quality of maintenance, but there's a lot of variability on how they actually would be enacted due to either staffing or funding or other constraints. For example, a baseball field, a little league baseball field. There may be a top-notch baseball field. It requires a full irrigation system, full subsurface drainage, maintenance once a week, to be mowed, to be edged, to be line trimmed, backstop fences, etc. That weekly maintenance with fertilizer, all the other needs, is significantly different than a baseball field for youth in a park that's not going to be hosting games or tournaments. That may only get mowed once a week. It may not have irrigation. It may have drainage just on the perimeter to have sheet flow. So the equipment that's there in the field itself really drives some of that maintenance, use of resources properly to keep it up to that standard of a high quality standard field. Now, it's probably not appropriate for all of your fields, and it's not appropriate to have a top-notch Little League field, soccer field, or other court necessarily to that standard. So there's a range. We do have kind of guidelines on if your users are going to be as a park resource versus going to be tournament quality fields. We have that spread, and we have recommendations on how frequently you should mow and edge and trim. But the caveat is that it draws laws to what is the field composed of, to able to handle and to take on that maintenance and really support the maintenance effort that's going into that particular field. Aeration. We hear some fields never get aerated. We think it should be aerated quarterly or 3 times a year. Most municipalities just can't aerate on that schedule to maintain a quality field, so they might get it every other year to aerate a field. I don't know, Tom, if you're aerating at all, but then that's great. So some of it might just be massaging what our standard is with what you can do as a staff and say, here's what you can do now, but if you want to take up a little bit of a notch, here's what more would have to happen in order to enhance field quality or your courts or other spaces within the parks, open space areas.
Can I follow that up real quick? And again, I don't want to belabor this, but Dan, to that point, those standards exist. Are they generally included in documents such as this?
Usually they're a staff document, supplemental to share with the town staff to be guidance for them. Once it goes into the document, the balance is, it may be a desired maintenance standard, but if staff just doesn't have the ability to maintain to that level for whatever reasons, financially or staffing availability, it puts the town in a little bit of a tough spot to maintain to that quality that was desired, but just may not be possible for whatever reason. So we share a lot of documents with staff to say, here's guidance for you, share as you're proceeding forward with building new fields, maintaining new fields, or retrofitting new fields for different uses, and use as a guidance for you. Once it goes into documents, it goes out to public and expectations are set. And we don't want to have, you all being struggling or failing with not able to meet those desires, but there's reality with finances and staffing that just sometimes can't support it.
Can I chime in, Kelly? I don't know, you might say the same thing I say, but I kind of feel like that's when it's on paper and we're looking at what we're spending as a Parks and Rec town now, as opposed to others, you think we're doing fine until you look at what is there. Sure. And I think this is the same thing. What we can do is one thing, but we want to know what we could be or should be doing. It may not mean we're going to get there, but sure, it's maybe where we should be, and we can say this is what we should be doing and try to get to that point and do the best we can. But if we don't know what we should be doing, we don't know if we're doing the right thing.
Sure. I echo that.
The one thing that I would caution on the numbers comparing to other municipalities that I don't think we necessarily teased out is that if a municipality were to contract a lot of the work versus doing in-house, you may see an increased costs as a result in those numbers. So for example, if Tom, mows almost all our fields and maintains on themselves, but if they were to contract that work, you may see a significant upcharge just because it's contracted work for maintenance or for new construction. So I give credit to Tom and staff. They do a lot of work on their own to reduce the costs. All the municipalities may not be as efficient of a staff or even capable of staff to do some of that work. So you're going to see increased expenditures to go into Parks and Rec facilities. And Tom, I don't know if you had any feedback from other staff you had talked to get those numbers from, but that's my first look. I'm not disclaiming all the numbers that came in, but others may be spending more on their costs for external resources than you might do with your staff.
Yeah, in talking to my colleagues, it's usually you do what with what. that's what we get. We get a lot of that. Definitely we're operating at a deficit compared to what a lot of our comparable towns are. I would argue that our fields are tournament quality almost across the board. I think every parent on this board or who's had a relative playing on either Curtis Park or Memorial Park or even at Weetog Park, those are high quality tournament quality fields and are maintained as such. Do we have other facilities in town that could be certainly upgraded? We do. Even at our tournament quality fields, the amenities that have been in place for a long time, whether that's the irrigation systems, the dugouts, the fencing, those things are starting to deteriorate. The playing fields are in great shape, but the other items, the infrastructure around them is starting to fall apart. And those are things, again, the irrigation systems everywhere at this point need to be upgraded for efficiency and just from maintenance standards. But I am always amazed, and as many people have said already, what we are able to do with what we have. While over the last 25 years, 2.5 decades, the town has added additional facilities, whether it's Simsbury Meadows or the Flower Bridge, the new park at the Flower Bridge. We've taken over maintenance of some of the Board of Ed fields. It's amazing. With really no additional funding over those 25 years. It's other than minor increases. We've done more with less, and I don't know how much longer it can continue to happen. And the expectation level for our residents of what they expect on the trails, whether it's restrooms, parking areas, field quality, those have not lessened. They have only increased, and rightfully so. They do pay a lot in taxes, and they expect comparable services, but that needs to trickle down to the Parks Division and to be able to service those people and meet those expectations.
I just want to say, Danielle Celli, that was my big takeaway from reading the thing, and I wrote to Tom about that. I just couldn't believe when I saw the numbers of the different towns, how much money we spend versus the others versus how much we use them. So I just want to say kudos to Tom and the whole rec department, and thank you, Eric, for acknowledging that. Really makes me feel good as a resident. Furthermore, I just had a question about the memorial pool and the splash pad. Is that a priority? Because I just feel like that might be versus just maintaining it. I just know so many people love memorial pool, and I just was wondering where it said high priority on there. And I just was curious if that is what the feedback was on that.
Dan, you want me to take this first?
Sure.
So Danielle, memorial, as you know, I mean, you've been there, you use it all the time.
Yeah.
The memorial pool is over 60 years old at this point. It might be closer to 70 years old. The bathhouse and the pool itself, the pool mechanics, are at the end of their life. I mean, realistically, they're at the end of their life. The pool, we're basically putting our fingers in the hole, like putting your finger in the dike to stop the leak all the time. Mm-hmm. The deck is failing, the fence is failing, the bathhouse is failing. The town within the next few years will need to make a major decision whether to spend a significant amount of money on an overhaul of that facility to keep it as a pool, or with the major renovation of Simsbury Farms, can we accommodate the aquatics swimming side of things here and maybe turn that facility over to something like a splash pad? Or, option two, renovate the bathhouse, renovate the splash pad, renovate the pool, and turn the kiddie pool into a splash pad or something to generate more use. It does not, other than the neighborhood, the neighborhood and the day camp, it doesn't get a lot of use. Still, maintenance of that pool is still being supported within the general fund, whereas Simsbury Farms is maintenance and staffing is falling within the special revenue fund. So there's a discrepancy in how both of those are funded. But a decision needs to be made on the long-term maintenance of that and viability of that facility. So I think that's why it's been moved up as a high priority, because you just at some point we're either looking at a shutdown or a renovation. It's not going to, it can't continue to operate the way it is.
Yeah, definitely. But it would be less expensive to have the splash pad than just redoing it. Is that what?
You would. I mean, a major. Dan might be able to speak better to what the overall number could look like, but it would be in the millions, probably in the close to $1 million to renovate that pool and the bathhouse.
Wow.
You could renovate the bathhouse and a splash pad for about $500,000.
Oh, interesting. Thank you for clarifying.
It also goes a little bit to the staffing needs. So a pool versus a splash pad would have a different demand due to the not having a water depth in a splash pad. So other life cycle costs come into play about how that could be maintained and operated with limited staff, et cetera. So beyond just the infrastructure cost upfront to design and construct.
And that's something to consider as minimum wage continues to rise on us. It's a cost we need to address. We're not taking in enough funds to pay for the staffing over there at now. So that's one way to look at it. If it's an amenity that people, it's becoming more common in all communities, not just communities like Simsbury. And that's kind of the trend of where things are going right now versus the pool concept. But we have a beautiful, 4-pool complex up here at Simsbury Farms, and maybe for a town this size, maybe that's enough. And we have a great infrastructure in place in Memorial Park. We have the parking. We could have a bathhouse that would be needed up there. All of the electrical, the water, everything is there to do one or the other, the pool or the splash pad. And the town may decide not to do either. But I think in a town, I think it's been noted through the survey and the focus groups and the public presentation that that's something people in this community desire. And anecdotally through social media, every time this topic pops up, it's something that generates a lot of interest as well. So we know that there's what's what I'm looking for. There's the warm fuzzy when everybody talks about the splash pad. Everybody wants it.
Yeah.
Finding the dollars to pay for it and figuring out those are the tough decisions the town will have to make. And certainly both of the groups that's everybody's on the call today would have some input into that as we begin to go forward with this. But the long and the short of it is the pool that pool needs a decision made either way on it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Anything else related to the pool?
Yeah, Eric, you okay? Yeah, exactly. I didn't know if Eric was still on. So are there any other comments that anyone would like to make regarding this?
One last question on my part, if you don't mind. It's Kelly Kearney. Just to make sure I understand it, and this is for Dan. Section 10, goals and action plan. Are these, and work with me on this, are these prioritized in order of importance? And I did go through the matrix and I took a look there, but just to make sure it's crystal clear for me, Section 10 is organized based on level of importance and priority?
Section 10.
Goals and action plan.
Yeah, the order at which they are is not driven by first is most important.
When this goes to the Board of Selectmen, will it be prioritized or force ranked in order of prioritized need based on all of the inputs?
What we have is at the end, I'm trying to go to the page.
There's a summary of the top recommendations, I believe.
Yeah, recommendations starts on page 100 or 101, where we give the prioritization of each of the goals. And then I believe we indicate which of the goals should be started first.
That was exactly where I was going. Was what is your recommendation for what should be started first? Because it was unclear to me. That doesn't mean that it's not clear to everybody, but it was unclear to me.
quickly just scanning. I believe we have that. We try to always give as to what should be the top projects or objectives to be achieved. Obviously, available funding and other influences can impact that. The one thing about this plan, which is challenging, is that there's many interests. So to say that your top priority may be to make improvement A, which is say the memorial pool, that were at all to become as the highest priority. There is also the interest on we should be proceeding forward with the guidance for maintaining or less maintenance of the open spaces. So although there's very significant financial differences there's perhaps different interest groups in those. That's all embedded within this whole plan. So it makes it challenging to say this is the one that you need to start with, because there's many different action items in here, from a physical improvement to a systematic process improvement, or recognition for how the committees or commissions kind of operate within the town to give guidance to the select board. So
I guess my takeaway, and I promise I'll stop talking, is I would expect, based on your level of expertise, two things. One would be that prioritized list, and I realize there are differing interests, but the quantitative analysis should at least give us a level of priority. And the second would be from a financial standpoint, because clearly there are financial decisions to be made. I'd call it the low-hanging fruit. So the two takeaways would be, what are the low-hanging fruit from an existing resource standpoint? And then what are the prioritized action items? Thanks.
This is Eric. The only other thing I wanted to add there is that anything that is not explicitly a high priority item or a low-hanging fruit, I really look forward to the partnership with Culture, Parks, and Rec and helping guide some of those recommendations as we head toward budget season. I saw Susan, you raising your hand.
Yeah, I think if we refer back to the RFP, we had said that one of the goals of this is to make sure that we take care of the things that we have. So dealing with any problems that are progressive and are going to result in more costly issues down the road is a priority. And also any actions that will save us money, obviously, would be a priority. So I think that, I would call those very, very low hanging fruit in terms of what to get traction on immediately.
Thanks.
No, and Eric, I agree that I think as long as we have somewhat of a priority list, that was at least my understanding, was then it was our job in our various committees to then go through that list. We develop the priority, and again, based also on low-hanging fruit. So we look forward to the chance that once this is all done, to work with the Board of Selectmen to put money and efforts where the priorities lie and really accomplish some things that are identified in the document. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Any other comments before we adjourn?
No, Tom, you're going to forward any of the other comments that were made. That's all included?
Yeah, I'm going to take, and again, if anybody had prepared comments, I know Kelly and Dave had both sent me something this morning. If anybody else has anything like that, that they had not yet sent me, that would be great. We have a Culture, Parks, and Recreation Commission meeting next week, and then the Open Space is meeting again, I believe, in August. But I would like to get Dan this information as soon as possible, as we're trying to get this to the Board of Selectmen. So if you could take some time this weekend and send me your comments, I will finish collating everything. Again, I've already got Sarah, Danielle, Jerry Wetchen, Marjorie, and Marjorie. We should all owe a big thank you to Marjorie. Her thorough review was especially helpful because I used her comments as a template to insert everybody else's in. So I've already passed some of that to Dan, but if you have anything, I could certainly add to that. I would like it to just give Dan one document that they can kind of go through and take all the feedback from one particular location. So your homework this weekend, if you haven't already done so, is to please send it to me by Monday morning, if you could.
Well, thanks, Tom, and thank you, Dan, for your work and your colleagues. And special thanks to the members of the steering committee who helped shepherd this process. So there's no other comments, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Have a good weekend.
You too.
You too.